Well, thank you, Sam, for making the time to share with us today. We are glad you're here. The advertising agency is dominated with large foreign players, large groups that control the industry. Well, so you think, right? But Sam Balsara's Madison World is the largest Indian communication company. And in the face of stiff competition, changing market dynamics, even recessions, Madison has not only survived, Madison has grown phenomenally over the past 32 years. Sam Balsara is indeed a man who walks tall among giants. And we have a lot to learn today as he shares lessons from his life. As the process today, Sam will talk to us for around 30 odd minutes, after which we will do questions and answers. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A tab. Please punch in your questions over there and we'll try and take as many questions as possible today. So let's get started. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Pramod. Delighted to be with all of you. First of all, I just saw the AV of IMA and I must congratulate IMA for all the activities that you're doing for your members. I must say a lot of our other industry associations must take the cue from a young association like IMA. When I was asked to speak to all of you, and I see IMA as a association of well-known, established and growing event agencies and entertainment agencies, I couldn't go back and think that for a long time at Madison, I did not want to start an event agency. Now you might well ask me why, and I'll give you a little background. In my younger days, I've been president of the Advertising Club Bombay, which at that time was the only sort of largish association of advertising professionals in Bombay. And whenever we did an event, the president and the officiating members had to do everything themselves. And you had to look after the stage backdrop, you had to look after the light, you had to look after the cues, you had to look after everything. And I've done all that myself. And keeping Madison's ethos in mind, that I never want to let down my client, or nothing should ever go wrong when a client has entrusted something to me, I thought it was too risky for me to start an event agency. Because as I saw it, in an event, anything could go wrong. And especially in those days, where we didn't have the benefit of so much technology, we didn't have the benefit of so much preparation. And I was also, by the way, amazed at the amount of preparation that you've done for this session. Having said that, let me say I have moved on. Now, fortunately, as part of Madison World, we have turned, which is an event and activation agency in the urban area, and we have a rural agency called Anugrah Madison that handles rural activations. I think thanks to my colleague Sunny, who joined us a few years ago, and hopefully now I don't have to worry about some of the events that he handles going wrong. So let me give you a little nuggets from my life, which probably you can draw your own lessons from. I spent my early years in a small town called Balsara, from where I get my name. Now, Why do I mention this? I mention it because in my subsequent years in advertising, I've come to believe that anybody who is in the communication business, and all of you are, I believe it's an advantage to have spent your younger days in smaller towns, if not villages, because you know you get to observe human behavior in its raw form. I think people who are bred in cities tend to kind of camouflage, we tend to camouflage our real persona. Whereas, in a small town or in a village, your neighbors, you know, the the small town barber, the small town shopkeeper, they're all true to themselves. So you get to understand and learn about human behavior, about human psychology, about shopping habits, what drives people, what drives their emotion. And therefore, I think, it's a big advantage actually to be born in a small town. I I remember some time ago at Goa Fest, we had invited one gentleman from Thyrocare, the owner of Thyrocare, and he started his presentation with a photograph of a small hut with a cow tied to a bamboo. And his opening line was, many of you here are from foreign universities, many of you here are from IIMs, but this behind me is actually my university. And actually, that I believe can be a better university than Harvard. So that was my first point, that I think it's a bit of an advantage to have spent your younger lives in smaller towns of India, especially. Now, as Pramod said, that Madison has been around for 32 years. I started in 1988. But before starting my own agency, I must say, and not many know this, that I have spent 16 years working in other places. After doing my MBA from Bombay, by the way, I was later on brought up in Bangalore. My schooling and college was in Bangalore. And I was all set to become a chartered accountant. But then, fortuitously, I got admission into Jamnalal Bajaj Institute in Bombay and decided to change course and come back and start my 2-year degree program there. And that's how I became a Bombayite. So after that, I joined 2 marketing companies, Sarabais, which many of you may not have heard of. And then I was a brand manager at Cadbury. And after 8 years in marketing, I then joined advertising, first at Contract, which was JWT's second agency just starting out then. And after 4 years there, moved on to Mudra, which was a very small agency then out of Ahmedabad, handling mainly Vimal and Rasna accounts. And I kind of virtually started their Bombay office. Now, why I recall all this is to tell you that, and to tell all younger people who wish to start out on their own, is don't be in a hurry to start. Give yourself maybe 1 or 2 extra years after you feel you are ready and you have acquired all the knowledge, skills, and importantly, experience to start and head your own agency. One of the things I remember keeping in mind when I started my agency and was kind of thinking of what kind of an agency it should be, I said, would I be happy working in this agency as a professional with 16 years experience and an MBA degree if the agency was not owned by me? And that was the test I wanted to put Madison to in its early years. And this was what guided many of my earlier decisions. Also, to share another insight, one of the reasons I left Mudra was not because I had a dying ambition to start my own agency and be my own boss or to make a lot more money than I was making at Mudra, but perhaps stupidly, but sort of ideally, I used to think that an ideal agency is a small agency with a few large clients. And therefore, when I abruptly decided to start Madison, I approached my then client with Mudra, Godrej, and another client, a Tata company called Nelco, which used to make televisions. And you'll be surprised to hear, not that both these clients readily agreed to give me their business, but for the first 5 years of Madison, I did not take on a third client. And that was not because we were not offered business or we were not invited to pitch for business, but because I thought I was not quite ready to sort of take on the additional responsibility of handling a third client. Also, perhaps I should mention, I was very keen that I not let down the two clients who had placed their trust and faith in me, and I definitely didn't want to betray that trust. So that is how Madison started. Now, by today's lens, sometimes I also wonder if that wasn't a stupid thing to do. But I think in hindsight, I think it was a good thing to do because I think it provided a strong foundation for Madison to grow upon in later years. Also, in those days, I was of the strong belief that a good advertising man has to be a craftsman and not just a manager of men and money. I must say, to this day, although you could argue that I am a little bit more of a manager of men and money than a craftsman, I try to keep my hands or get my hands dirty to remain a craftsman. Also, one of the early things that has stayed with me, and I believe this is because of my marketing and advertising background, and as the world became more competitive, and as we began to work with large clients, and I began to see their thinking processes, and many of them wanted to play safe we developed a philosophy that if it's safe, it's risky. I repeat, if it's safe, it's risky. So I think to make a mark today in marketing, in advertising, in events, in entertainment, you can't afford to play safe, because I think playing safe is the riskiest thing to do. One of the other pet beliefs that I've grown to strongly believe in is that the most important skill in life, and especially in advertising and communication, is the ability to sell an idea. I think it's not, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, the most important skill is not really to generate a wonderful idea, but the more important skill is to be able to sell that idea to a client. So I must say that at Madison, the early years were without too much of any untoward events, and we were chugging along merrily. And I always feel that I think you can't always sort of get overconfident about your own skill. God helps you along. And I think for me, that big second stage in life happened when my major client, Godrej, did a tie-up with Procter and Gamble, the world's largest advertiser, and who I think by and large the marketing and advertising industry held in awe for their marketing prowess. To my surprise, when Synthol, the soap brand that I handled, came under Procter and Gamble's wing in terms of marketing, the production continued with Godrej. One fine day, I got called in by the managing director of Procter and Gamble to tell me that P&G liked what we were doing for Synthol, liked our energy, liked our enthusiasm, liked our speed of response, and they would like to entrust some of their own brands to us. But to do that, we had to tie up with one of their international agencies. Not fully understanding the ramifications, I readily said yes. And that is how we tied up with an international agency called DMB&B. I couldn't remember that name for a few months after we had tied up with them. And one of our creative directors in our Christmas card that year said, one of the ways to remember it is something like dal, matar, bun and butter, or something like that. But that was a rather short-lived tie-up. We decided to part company. We had the guts to take that decision. And surprise of surprise, that decision willy-nilly actually led to Madison losing 70% of its revenue that year because we lost PNG, which means we lost Wix and Whisper that we used to handle for them. Then we lost Godrej's Synthol, and then we lost one or two other smaller accounts, and that made up 70% of our revenue. I must say, I was feeling down, but of course could not afford to feel out. And at that time, I remember listening to a Southeast Asian gentleman on television on a channel which was very new at that time called CNBC, that real success can come only after real failure. And I really took solace in this statement and took this statement to heart. And I must say, it turned out to be true. One another thing I must mention, and which obviously was an important turning point in my life and my professional career, was one fine day PNG called me and said, look, one of the things we realized is that besides being good in advertising, we think Madison is very good in media. So we are wondering if instead of dealing with 4 agencies, would it not be advantageous for us to deal with one agency in media? I won't bore you with other details. They went on to call a pitch, and surprise of surprise, we won the pitch. We then went on to actually start a media alone business, which actually my industry association and a lot of stalwarts at that time fought tooth and nail to stop, because they thought that a media alone business was not in the interest of the industry as a whole. Well, we went on to become fairly successful in the media alone business. And that soon led me to believe in the concept of specialization in the communication business. I thought to myself, based on my media alone offering experience, that specialization is good for the client. And the reason it's good is because it develops a cadre of professionals who, by repeatedly focusing on doing the same thing, become experts at it, discover more sophisticated, more efficient, and more effective ways of getting a positive outcome. The client begins to recognize them as experts. By virtue of that specialization, you're able to offer that service at a lower cost to the client, which the client begins to appreciate. And you overall, at the end of it, the agency develops a certain reputation and a certain skill set, which an unspecialized agency may find difficult to match. One of the things I think, if I look back, is that it takes some time for me to get sold on an idea, but once I get sold on it, I don't give up on it too easily. So I pursued that idea with other disciplines in communication. For example, we then started a PR agency. We then started an outdoor agency. We then started a rural agency, and so on, till more recently, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, we started also an event agency. And all these agencies are headed by what I would consider true blue pedigreed professionals who are actually narrow experts in their field in which Madison is venturing. So my belief is that for these individual units of Madison World, I want to hire only the best specialist available rather than hire a generalist. I would also say, looking back, Madison's growth has not been by design. You'll be surprised that I think in the first 25 years of Madison, that Madison grew very well, we did not, I don't know, I would call, have a, I would say, a long-term strategic plan for Madison's growth. I somehow didn't believe in that. What I thought was I should stay close to the knitting, and if my client is delighted and if my client grows, then Madison will grow. So I'm fond of saying at Madison, growth is a byproduct. Whilst I'm happy to participate in a discussion at the client's end for a brand's growth, we've not had too many discussions on strategies for Madison's growth, because I think the strategy has been rather simple. If the client grows, then Madison will grow. So with this in mind, I think in more recent times, I think my mantra has always been to focus on client delight, and number one, because that to my mind is the founding cornerstone for any agency, whether it's an event agency or a media agency or a creative agency. The second thing in today's time, I believe, is to control agency costs and even therefore client costs, because I think efficiency today is the name of the game. And every client, now even clients have full-fledged departments which are working on eliminating costs or reducing costs. So I think the focus of the agency must be also to run a lean, mean organization that can offer an effective service at a competitive price, or a price that the client can easily afford, and paying that price can make a profit utilizing that service. That I believe is important for an agency to understand. Because related to the point on efficiency is also effectiveness. I believe today we have gone past the stage where we just measure output. Clients want to measure outcome. And I think if we are able to give a satisfactory outcome to the client, then while the client may argue with you on fees and costs and all that, a good client will probably reward you with an incentive or additional business or in some way look after you. Also, one of my other beliefs has been that big ideas can work or can beat, in fact, big budgets any day. So I think whatever business you're in, whether it's events or PR or creative or media, I think you got to learn to come up with big ideas that don't necessarily cost the moon. I don't know if that's, have I crossed my 30 minutes, Pramod?
No, Sam, I think you continue. You got a few minutes left. Don't worry.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left.
Yeah, we'd love to hear more.
So I have now shared with you some of my thinking and some of my beliefs that have guided Madison in its early and middle years. I would now tell you a little bit about, Madison's immutable laws. When in my younger days in marketing, one of my favorite books was the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, I think, or advertising. It was by Jack Trout and Al Ries. I'm sure many of you have read this book. If you haven't, I would urge you to read this book. When my daughter Lara joined the business, 2-3 years after that, she was asked to make a presentation on Madison. And I was delighted that she titled her presentation, The 13 Immutable Laws of Madison. And I thought I would share with you some of these laws which she came up with, of course, based on observing what Madison had been doing. And one of the first laws, which I think would be relevant to a lot of your members, would be the law of disadvantage. Now, what is this law of disadvantage? I feel it's an advantage to know that you are at a disadvantage. I know that Madison is most often at a disadvantage when it comes to competing for a client along with another global agency that has billions of dollars of billings and can boast of so many facilities and infrastructure and tens of thousands of people and whatnot. But I believe to recognize that you are at a disadvantage is actually an advantage. In fact, if you recognize that you have an advantage, that becomes a disadvantage. And I think many large agencies, get into this pitfall. So that's I thought, one important law of Madison. Another important law that we have stood on is the law of focus. Over my 32 years you know, lots of interesting proposals have come to us. Some proposals to get into real estate, some proposals to get into starting a school, not of advertising, but, a primary school or a secondary school. And over the years, I must say, we have rejected or not decided to venture into these because I said, look, I'm not a businessman. I'm an advertising and communication professional, and I should be seen as one. It would not give client any confidence to see that the person who he is entrusting his business with, also has the business of real estate or has the business of running a school or any other business, which makes a lot more money than advertising and communication does. I don't know if I'm right in having done this, but I believe this has stood me in good stead. Another important law, as Madison has grown a little larger, is the law of organization building. And I think most young entrepreneurs, I think, reach a certain level and then are unable to go beyond that. And I think many event agencies could face this barrier. And I think that is because possibly not enough attention is being paid to building the organization as you grow larger. The same things and the same infrastructure and the same organization structure that worked when you were a small event agency won't work when you become a medium-sized agency. And the infrastructure and organization structure when you're a medium-sized agency won't work when you become a big agency. So organization building is also very important. Other two laws which I could pull out from Lara's list is the law of patience. As you can see, we have not been wildly successful. I think we have been reasonably successful. But I think we're glad that at least we are standing 32 years down the road. And that is because I believe of our law of patience. We've never been in a desperate hurry to sort of achieve something. We said, never mind, we'll try and achieve it next year, but let's do the job well. Let us not take any shortcuts. Let us not shortchange anyone. Let us be fair to everyone we deal with. One of our value systems, and our value systems are printed and put up on our office walls, says that we must be fair to to all the segments in our industry. We must be fair to our clients, we must be fair to our employees, and we must be fair to our suppliers. And I think that is also a very important thing that holds you in good stead and helps you develop a good reputation. I must talk to you about one more thing, and that is the law of change. You heard me say that Madison started with 2 clients, and the first 5 years we did not take in a third client. Well, I must tell you, today we have 11 units, including events and rural activation. We have, I think, about 800 people, and we deal with as many as 500 clients across Madison World. So somewhere you will see that we changed our mind. So as our management bandwidth increased, and as we began to see that for a successful agency, having built a strong reputation, we need to also get in good profits in the company. And to do that, we need to have a mix of large, medium, and small clients. So this is a realization we came to a few years ago, I would say 8, 9 years ago. And that is when actually we saw a little spurt in our growth in revenue and profits, because we found that we were able to easily extend this service to a slightly larger number of clients by not adding a proportionate number of additional people. So I think it's also important to change at the right time. Perhaps one of our weaknesses is that we don't change as often and as much as we should. Okay, I think that's what I would end with, and maybe now I will request Pramod to ask me any questions that may have occurred to him.
Thank you, Sam. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, and I see a lot of questions being posted by a lot of people out here. I do not know if I can take them all today, but we will try. Okay, we'll try and do that. So let me start with one question that's coming from Himanshu Shah, and his question is really about the ever diminishing margins that clients are enforcing upon agencies. I'm sure it applies to even ad agencies as well. But even the event space sees a lot of clients pushing the margins down tremendously. So the days of the long margin has now gone. And what are the strategies, or how does Madison deal with the clients that's insisting upon reducing the agency fee or the agency percentage in terms of doing business with them?
Well, I must say, Madison has been a victim of this. And one of the things, or one of our responses, has been to grow in scale. I think reducing margins is a fact of life. You can bemoan it, and if you keep bemoaning it and you keep refusing business, then I think one day you have to shut down. I think I did not tell you the story that when Procter and Gamble appointed Madison as their media agency, actually we lost revenue. Imagine we made such a big win. We won the media AOR of Procter and Gamble, the world's largest advertiser, and the potential of it in a growing country like India. And instead of making more money, we were going to make less money. We were going to make less money because from earning 15%, we were earning 2.5% of a slightly larger pie, but we had to invest a lot more in more people. So from a from a here and now business point of view, it didn't make any sense. And I could have, if I was looking at only margins, I should have refused the business. If you also remember, one of my second point after client delight was eliminating costs. Why did I make this to be such a big point? Because the ground reality is that every client, big or small, and the larger they come, the bigger they push, wants to reduce costs. And even if they don't want to reduce costs, they want to bring down your profit margins. So my advice would be not to bemoan this, but to try and work, cut the coat according to the cloth you have. And I think this is where, managerial skill and optimization skills come in.
Right. Sam, we have around 7 to 8 minutes on the clock, so I'm going to try and combine a few questions. The question by Kinjal, his question is regarding the poaching of clients. As there are more and more agencies that are desperate for work and desperate for growth, we see a long pattern of agencies poaching clients and employees leaving organizations and then poaching on those clients. And I'm using the word poaching because that was mentioned over here. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think is it okay, or do you think the benefit of doubt needs to be given to the client? Or how do you react to this kind of a concept that we see prevalent in both advertising as well as event agencies?
The world has changed. When I joined advertising was like an old boys club. There was HTA, there was Ogilvy, there were a few other agencies like Sisters, Decuna, Frank Samois. And although there were no written rules, agencies played, and the leadership of these agencies, who were fine men with some vision and some integrity and some sense of right and wrong, played to an unwritten rule book. But unfortunately, today things have changed, and you can't blame anyone for it. Business has become cutthroat. It is a dog-eat-dog world. So poaching is going to happen. The bigger, the stronger, the ones with more resources are going to flex their muscles and are going to browbeat the younger agencies. That is why the point I made is that big ideas can work better than big budgets. The fact that you have so many 100 event agencies as your members is proof that, there is place for everyone. If there wasn't, then there wouldn't have been so many agencies. So I think rather than bemoan this fact, I think you have to recognize it and sharpen and hone your skills and come up with innovative ideas so that, you blow away the client.
Thank you, Sam. I think that's a good way to look at it. It is what it is. And well, I'm going to combine two questions. There's a question from Suresh and from Ravichandran. Both are pertinent to the outdoor advertising space, but that brings up the larger question. Do you think standalone agencies will survive in this kind of a space? Or is there a need to join a group or collaborate across different specialities and form a new company? And this is a question that a lot of people are going to ask, because we have a lot of agencies that are standalone event agencies offering specialized services either in BTL or in mall promotion or in conferencing or MICE events. Whereas we also see advertising agencies that are now creating their own specialized units for the same. So the question is one that, and the second part of it is, Well, the question here is, what do you think an agency in outdoor advertising needs to do to upgrade, to survive? I've combined a couple of questions to form this
Okay.
one.
So, well, there isn't a simple answer to. I think individual agencies will also survive. I mean, there is no question about it. You know, all over the world, there are standalone agencies. They may not be of very big size, but of course, there will be standalone agencies. And as long as there is human ambition, there is desire, there is the need to be independent, there will always be independent agencies. So I don't think I can give you one advice that no, you should kind of abandon your agency or desperately go and tie up with a larger agency or form necessary a conglomerate of smaller agencies and become one large agencies, because all those bring about their own problems. Sure, I think if there are three or four smaller agencies and there is a meeting of mind and you think you can live with each other and understand each other for the next 10 to 20 years, you could do that. But it's a tough it's a tough proposition. So you might be better off on your own than trying to become big. I think that's where my law of patience also comes in. I think Rome wasn't built in a day. So
Hmm.
I think maybe I'm old fashioned in that uh, respect. And I know younger people today don't have patience as a virtue. And, everybody wants to become an Ambani over the next 3 years. But in reality, that's not always possible. You can try, but make sure that in trying to do that, you don't blow up and waste away whatever you already have.
Right. Sam, there's a very different kind of a question from Ish. I'm presuming Ish is a student here. He's asking, what is the best agency or the best field to join in today for growth? Is it
Best way.
the best agency or the best field? I'm presuming he means to ask, for example, he's saying, should he get into advertising or marketing or events? Where do you see a bigger future for people joining in?
No, I would say the more important thing is to understand the different skill sets that are required by these different agencies and understand what your skill set and liking is and join that field. I don't think you should just go by the growth potential, because you don't want to be a square peg in a round hole.
Hmm.
So I think India is a large country, and I must say this, that overall, advertising and communication is only 0.34% of the national GDP. The global average is close to 1%. So not only is our GDP going to grow, I mean, coronavirus notwithstanding, I think even the percentage of spend is going to grow. So I think I have no doubt that the pie is growing. I mean, just to give you a sense, when I used to work for Cadbury, of course, a long, long, long time ago, Cadbury's turnover was 20 crores. So today, the advertising market is 75,000 crores. And I think it's going to continue to grow, according to me, by at least 10 to 12% every year, say over a decade, at least. So I think all disciplines are going to grow. It's a question of which discipline are you well suited to and where can you outshine. It's more important to select that discipline where you can make a mark for yourself.
Right. I think that answers the question for you, Ish. given the time, Sam, I think we'll just do two questions more very quickly. The question from Dhruv Davar. He asks, could you give an example of the law of disadvantage?
Okay. What I mean by this is, let's say, let me take the example of a media agency which I'm closest to. Let's say here is Madison going into a pitch, and there's another global agency also in the pitch. The global agency knows that they are India's largest agency. They know that they deal with the client already in 20 countries. Madison has no familiarity with the client. Madison, whilst it's confident that it will win, in reality, from where I see it, its chances are very low. So what does Madison do? Madison works double hard, not double hard, but triple hard, does all kinds of analysis, does all kinds of spade work, gives it everything that it has. What does the global agency do? Get a few learnings from a few countries around the world, whether they are relevant or not, who knows. Puts together a presentation and goes and presents it to the client. I think sometimes the passion with which you present says a little more than what the content is. This is what I mean by the law of disadvantage, that you go with the full knowledge that you are at a disadvantage. Because when you know this, then you actually put in a lot more effort, and that effort invariably will show, and the client will be able to discern who is hungry for his business. Have I tried to understand, make my point clear?
Yes, Sam, I think it's very clear. It reminds me of the saying, train like you've never won and play like you never lost.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So I'm going to take one more last question, Sam, and this is from Sushma. She's asking, what do you predict as the future trends of the marketing and advertising industry, the media industry? What should we look out for? What's the next big thing?
Well, I think it's too broad a question, but I think this general sort of belief, and it's all going to be in the area of data and technology as very important sort of tools which can help you, generate, or that can provide a lot of material that can help you generate a better creative idea or a better media plan or a better event, or a better idea for a powerful event or activation. So data and technology, are the two new sort of dancing damsels that we have to embrace in order to win in today's world. I mean, these two were not necessary, a decade ago.
Right. I think that's a good way to look at it, Sam. And I think that should be the closing that we need to wind up on. So before I hand over to Pavleen, Sam, a very big thank you. You've been absolutely candid and insightful. And so thank you very much for sharing this with all of us here today.